So I'm Kat. Nice to meet you. How many of you have heard of mapping before today? Cool. How many of you have created a map? How many of you have used a map? How many of you have shared a map with a friend or colleague? Cool. Okay, good. All right, moving right along. So first thing, a bit of a warning, none of this is approved by Simon Wardley. So he is in the front row. If he stomps out in a rage, we'll know what's up. Yeah, okay, yes. So one day, I'm sitting there, I can't remember what I was doing. It was some laundry, it was something really boring. And my mom texts me, and she goes, have you ever heard of this thing called Wardley mapping? And I said, yeah, Ma, I've heard of it. Yeah, sure have. But what I was thinking to myself is, I have heard of Wardley mapping. I do not engage in that practice in the same way that I think many of my peers do, where you gather everyone together in a big room over the course of days and create this huge map that then takes weeks to turn into some sort of digital artifact that then you pass around and you treat with all this reverence or anything like that. That's obviously not really my style, so that's why I told her, yes, I have heard of mapping before, but I didn't tell her that I'm out there mapping all the things. My mom lives life at 11, so she's a grandma. We call her Meemaw. We have hats that say "Go Team Meemaw." She owns her own business. It is company that puts on endurance gravel cycling events. So she has a lot of energy, so she's not satisfied when I send her that text. She immediately calls me and is like, what is the deal with this? How have I never heard of this before? Everyone in your world must be doing this all the time, right? And I felt so bad to disappoint her because I said, no, I don't think, if my Anik data is any indication, I don't think everyone is out there creating maps, because a lot of times when I start a conversation, so Avdi was just talking about how we were talking about maps in Australia, and when I get into a conversation with people about maps, usually they say this to me: I'm excited to create my first map. If you're so excited, how about you just do it? That's kind of my feeling on that. So my mom is just so disappointed at this point. What do you mean not everyone is doing this? She goes, what are they doing? And I said, well, they're doing this, which is the strategy generator that Simon showed in his talk, right? And it seems to be working out just fine for a lot of folks. Yeah, I don't know. She says, well, why is mapping working out for you? Because by this point, I've kind of told her, yes, I do this, but probably not in the way that you're imagining. And I said, well, I think it is due to the fact that I don't actually care about maps at all. No offense, Simon Wardley. But the thing is, I have this habit of signing up for jobs that I can't do, that I don't know how to do. That's kind of my thing. And so I've just been using maps to get unstuck. I find something that I don't know how to proceed, and I use a map to get unstuck. Oh, obviously there's these options, now I have to choose. So I'm also lazy. That's a key thing about me, and I think that's why I fell into engineering. So I also want to find what is the least I can possibly do at any point to get unstuck. And so what I have discovered through my travels with mapping is that many times we don't even have to create the artifact that is a map. So there's an engineer on my team who is brilliant. He's much smarter than I will ever be or could ever be in 100 lifetimes. He has this habit of holding these complex models in his head, and he can hold all the pieces and all the possibilities in his head all at the same time. He's blind, so he has a lot of practice at holding these things in his head because he's not sitting there and making a sketch of them, right? So we would have a conversation, and I would say, okay, I'm trying to understand where we're gonna go in regards to this, and he would start talking, and I would be frantically scribbling down notes and trying to draw pictures so that later I could digest all of this brilliant stuff that he's told me, and it was not working. So I got this idea, what if I point him in the direction of Wardley Maps? What would that look like? What would it look like to send a blind guy to go learn about Wardley Maps? And actually, it was totally cool. So first I sent him a video of Simon doing just an overview of mapping, and he loved that, and then he started reading the book, which is online, totally for free, and you can all go read it. And so he started reading that, and we started talking about this all the time, pretty much. We were very excited that now I could begin to understand him, and after a couple weeks, he was explaining things to me using those words from Wardley Maps, using the ideas. We weren't drawing any maps, obviously. I was sometimes as he's talking, but he wasn't drawing any maps. He wasn't sending me any artifacts, but I was finally understanding him, and it just felt like such a breakthrough. And then that language, because he and I then had this thing where we could understand each other, that language started to spread outwards a bit, so that then we had this slightly larger group that all have the same lexicon, and then a slightly larger group that all had the same lexicon. And now we encounter people in other teams who have that vocabulary and have never heard of Wardley mapping. But those things still stand for the things that they stand for, and we now can have these much better conversations. So I basically told my mom the map is not the thing, right? It's kind of this process, it's this vocabulary, it's this foundation for having a much more meaningful conversation, that you kind of get rid of that where you're having to build the context from scratch. Ooh. But sometimes you do have to build a map. And so when my mom called me up, she started saying, if we had been doing mapping when we had to make this big decision about the business, because I help her out with that stuff, then it would have been so much easier to make the decision. And I said, Ma, I did make a map. I can't figure that stuff out on my own. I did make a map. So what happened was she wanted a new way to time the riders. Right, so they go across the finish line and they get a time, yes? So she had a vendor that did that, and the vendor was terrible, and so she fired the vendor, and she's like, oh, my precious daughter knows how to computer, maybe she can whip something up. And I said, that sounds totally rad. Any day with RFID in it is a cool day. I'm totally down for that. And then I thought, what actually goes into this? So I started mapping it out, and I realized I can't do that in my spare time. I don't know what will happen to me. So then we thought, what are our other options? We could have actual human beings sit there at the finish line and mark down times. That's something that we could do, right? Or we could look for another vendor. And so we mapped out those options, and we thought, oh, having human beings that we just pay an hourly rate sit there at the finish line will definitely be the best thing for us, until we mapped it out and saw that one dot turn into bunches and bunches and bunches of dots of all the things that we would have to do in order to enable that. And remember, I'm lazy, so I advised my mom against that, and we ended up finding a vendor, and it ended up being cheaper long term. But these are the maps. I think my son spilled something on the first iteration of it. I cut up pieces of another one, and I don't even know what that sheet is. And obviously, I was a little upset at one point, so apologies for that. I did censor it. Yeah, so that's kind of what this is a typical map for me. So when I'm at work, yes, this is what we draw. And I have a whiteboard behind my desk. I draw hideous things. People come by, literally laugh at me, and then make notes on the map. Why are they comfortable doing that? Because it's hideous. No one's like, oh, I'm gonna mess up that piece of crap. This is another, where is Ben in here? Yes, Ben's in the back. So Ben was kind enough to give this to the world. This is something that I've used a lot, which is a template if you're making a map with other people that are not sitting right next to you, or whatever the case may be, not located next to you in terms of space or time. So there's this template. What I found with this template is because this real-time board, or whatever they changed their name to, they have a log of the changes that have been made. So a lot of times when we draw a map, what I've noticed is people are like nervous to erase something, or because you can't get it back, right? With this, you can't get it back. The changes are there. You can get it back, it's fine. So this is another interesting thing that I've done, and you can kind of asynchronously work on a map, like, oh, when you get a chance, can you take a look at that? And again, it's not beautiful. I love it, Ben, but it's not beautiful, right? No one's going to feel bad about going in there and messing with that map. I have a friend who's an economist, and we map all the things, often with wine. So it ends up being interesting. But we have all sorts of things, right? We've now put skills onto the map, and we put money on, and we put all these different things onto these maps, and we just draw them on a tablet. They're all hideous, and our family members make fun of us. But I think this is the advantage, and we had this conversation over breakfast this morning, a few of us, but an unfinished looking artifact invites other people to that conversation, right? So that map, when we all get together in the big room and it's very fancy and it turns into this PowerPoint monstrosity or some lucid chart thing, do I get a read-only license? Do I get an edit license? I don't know. These unfinished artifacts are inviting other people to that conversation. It's fine if you laugh at me on your way past my desk and make some notes on that map. That is a perfectly valid thing to do. And I kind of think that the idea that many of these maps will end up in the trash is freeing for people, right? They're not worried like, well, if I put my idea out there and then it gets sent to the SVP of who the heck knows, and then the senior DevOpper, that's a new thing that we came up with, who is going to say that this isn't right, is that going to come back on me? No one is saying that. I have a big pile of scratch paper on my desk. No one is saying that about our scratch paper maps. No one's like, boy, I'm really afraid to put this dot here. It's ending up in the trash. We've made our peace with that, right? So we've now lowered people's inhibitions a little bit. Sometimes you have to do even more work. It's very unfortunate. So yesterday, Simon said this. You create a map, you give it to other people, you get their feedback, and that's kind of what I've done with the whiteboard behind my desk, right? Draw something up there, get other people's feedback. What I think is something really interesting to do is have everyone make their own individual map, just on a piece of scratch paper, not any big thing. We're not spending weeks making this beautiful. We're all just sketching something out over lunch or something like that. We all get back together, we all put our maps out there on the table and compare. What's the same? What's different? But now there's no groupthink here, right? Each one of us has individually used what we know, our specific viewpoint. It doesn't matter what role you have in the organization or anything like that. And we're putting the things out there that we know, and now we can put them together. So that pattern is called diverge. We want to get all the options that are out there. We want to go broad. Everyone put exactly what you're thinking, right? Don't spend too much time on this. And then converge. So now we'll build a shared understanding by building a shared map, and that will give us this idea of how to move forward. So that pattern I found to be very valuable. And You have to make sure that people don't give you the, we're duplicating work. This is going to be wasted. Yes, it is going to be wasted. Literally all of the maps that we create in the first pass are going to end up in the trash because we're then going to make another map. So we just have to tell people, don't spend more than an hour on this. It's literally going to end up in the trash. Just keep reinforcing that. I do put a little star on there because I think there's something really interesting that I've found. So I have all of these notebooks that have those doodles. I have the canvas, right, that has all of those. It is very interesting to revisit the maps after whatever you were pondering. So I've now gotten unstuck and I've started working, and now I'm going to go back and revisit my assumptions that I had about this context and see what I had written down there. We have this thing in our brains, which is good and also bad, where we can try to achieve retrospective coherence, yes? So things happen, and how many of you have said this? I find myself saying this all the time. I just had a feeling that would happen. You know, I kind of knew when this person said that and this other person, I had a feeling that would happen. No, you didn't. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So that's not something that your brain does naturally, like confronting itself, right? You'd probably go nuts if you did that all the time. But if you do keep some of those maps, the ones that you think are going to be important to reflect on, and you're keeping them for you, you're comparing you to you, right? Past you to future you. No one's going to grade you on this, but you can start to see what your blind spots are. What did I not put in this map? What did we not even consider, right? So then you're training yourself for future maps and for future exercises. You're now developing a sensitivity to the things which historically you've been blind to. Does that make sense to everyone? Does that not make sense to anyone? Is everyone looking at those fish? What are they? Mammals? They're some sort of mammal? Mammal. Consensus is mammal. All right. So at this point, my mom's like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see using mapping in any of these ways, even with your father. So I knew that she was serious about it. She said this, no one ever taught me strategy, right? This isn't something that she learned, right? And so now she's like, well, yeah, I'll use this tool, I'll kind of catch up. And I said, yeah, Ma, like these are the people who do the strategery, right? There's a whole industry built up around making those Mad Libs, is there not? Yeah, of course there is. And so are those folks who have been traditionally included in that industry, do they have a big motivation to change and start adopting mapping? This technique that can help us learn about our own blind spots, that can help us build a shared context and move forward. If you are profiting off the old paradigm, does it make sense that you would just be like, oh, hot damn, let me do this thing that's totally free and available on the internet. I can go read all about it and anyone can learn. I say no, given what I know. Ben did say I've spent a lot of time around executives. So we say, like, why do people change? And they have a burning platform, or there's some sort of peer pressure, or whatever the case may be. If you're looking to get mapping adopted in your organization, bear in mind the people that are currently profiting or benefiting from the existing paradigms are not going to be your best customers for mapping. That is just not a thing. It's going to be the people who are never taught strategery, okay? So I don't know if you noticed anything about the characters in my story, but those stories are all about people that have been somewhat excluded from the strategery space, are they not? So I think if you find this practice very valuable and you would like to start doing this in your organization or start doing this for yourself, your allies are going to be the people who have been traditionally excluded from that space. That's where you can find good allies. So I don't know if you have a grandma or a blind guy or a millenni-lady, but I'm sure you can find one. And then don't make it so hard to start, right? We're not going to make a big production out of this. The map is not the thing, right? We want to achieve something. We're not mapping for the sake of mapping because it makes us feel cool. That's not, if you're doing it for that reason, I have some bad news for you, it's never going to catch on, right? So we're doing this for a purpose. Let's just get to it. If you're excited for your first map, let's map. There's an open space. Yeah, let's go map some stuff, right? So I think what I've found to be the really cool thing about mapping, yes, it helps me understand the world in which I'm operating a little bit better. It reveals my blind spots, but it's also this magical invitation for other people to participate. And right now, everything is changing so quickly. You need everyone to participate. That's the thing that you need. You need everyone to participate. So has anyone heard this thing, oh, you only use 10% of your brain? It's now been disproven, but you've heard it, right? Anyone not heard that before? You only use 10% of your brain. What if that was you only choose to use 10% of your brain? What would you say about someone that only chose to use 10% of their brain? What's wrong with you, right? Like, you're choosing to only use 10% of your brain, but that's what we're doing when we don't invite people into these conversations about where we're headed, right? And the decisions that we're making about our ecosystem. Who has the most information there? The people who are doing the work have information about how the ecosystem is evolving. So if we're not inviting those people into these conversations and making it easier for those people to participate, you are making the choice to use 10% of your brain. Do you feel good about that? Silence. I guess everyone feels fine. Yeah, so I think from my perspective, what we want to do is make the act of mapping not any cool thing. Like, no one that I work with who does maps with me is like, oh, we need a map. They say, oh, we need to figure out X. And then the way that we do that is through a map, right? Because we've now lowered the cost of just creating a map so much by making it this, crappy looking thing on a piece of soda stained paper and all of that stuff, right? And now, because we share that lexicon, people don't have to wonder, how do I participate in this conversation? They understand we have this model for how we have these types of conversations. We all understand how to participate, so people that have been excluded from that other type of strategery language, they now feel welcome participating. And I think that, for me, is the most powerful part of mapping, is that it is an equalizer within your organization, so you can capitalize on all of the smart people that you have in your organization. So that's pretty much where I land on that. We make hundreds of these probably. Definitely, in a year, hundreds. And most of them end up in the trash. And on that, I'm done.